Rishi Sunak wrapping up his statement in Downing Street. They're confirming that the general election will take place on the 4th of July, just 6 weeks and 1 day from. He'd already asked the King for permission to suspend and dissolve Parliament. That had been granted. The growth figures and this morning's inflation figures proof, Rishi Sunak said, that the plan he set out is working. And now is the moment, according to the Prime Minister, for Britain to choose whether to build on that plan, he said, or to go back to square one with no plan at all. His message to the voters: you must choose who is prepared to take the bold action necessary to keep our country and children safe. And he vowed in the coming weeks to fight for every vote and told the people of this country, I will earn your trust. Britain will go to the polls on the 4th of July for the first time in 4.5 years, kicking off a snap election campaign that will last just 6 weeks. Let's go live to Natasha Clark, LBC's political editor, outside Downing Street. Natasha, we knew it was coming, so it proved. What did you make of what the Prime Minister had to say?
Ben, we've had it confirmed after we've been waiting all day for that news. Britain will be going to the polls on July the 4th, and I think we heard quite a lot from the Prime Minister just there about exactly what kind of battle that he hopes that we're going to be fighting between the Labour Party and the Conservatives over the next few weeks. The Prime Minister again talking about economic security, talking about how we're in a more unstable world than we have ever been before, and that he believes that he is only the man to lead us through that economic turbulence and that global instability around the world. He talked about war coming back to Europe. He talked about the furlough scheme, which obviously he oversaw when he was Chancellor. I think he wanted to remind us all about that, because remember, Ben, he was at the height of his popularity when he revealed that furlough scheme, bailing out millions of businesses during the pandemic. And now he's talking about how we're in a war in Europe, the world's more unstable than it's ever been before, and that he thinks that he is the guy. He says that Labour is the party that doesn't have a plan. There's the Keir Starmer, you don't really know what he stands for and what his policies would be. He said that when the Labour leader became Labour leader, he changed his tune, and how can you trust that this is the guy to run the country? Putting up a clear blue line between him and the Labour leader. So yes, a lot to go on in that speech. He mentioned the NHS, he mentioned his education reforms, how he wanted to turn Britain into a smoke-free generation. So lots of things the Prime Minister wanted to try and to say that he's already got a record on, and he wants you, the public, to continue to trust him to get on with the job and deliver it. But look, Ben, you know those polls, you know what they're saying. We know that the Prime Minister is incredibly unlikely, as it stands, to make it back into that number 10 door just behind me on July the 5th, and it's incredibly likely if all the polls are to be correct. And obviously we don't know. Sometimes they aren't correct, and the polls have been so wrong before. But Rishi Sunak believing that he thinks that this summer election is now the time to go. We didn't hear much from him about why he feels like now is that time, but we have heard the rhetoric from him ramping up over the last few weeks, and it's very clear from him that he's taking that big risk, that big gamble, because he believes that this is now either this is the only chance that he's going to have to go to the country with some good economic news, or he genuinely believes this is the best chance that he's got to hold on to the keys to Downing Street.
And lots of talk, Natasha, wasn't there, about security, about the state of the world right now, Putin and Ukraine, China, AI and so on. We saw him touch on this when he gave that sort of informal election launch last week. He's trying to paint a picture of a very, very scary world, a very frightening world, in which there is a sense of better the devil you know to take us and lead us through it. Do you think people will buy that? It's quite a risky strategy, it seems to me.
It is, and I think it did work for Boris Johnson when he was up against Jeremy Corbyn back in 2019, saying, do you really trust this guy who's been a bit wobbly on NATO, a bit wobbly on the nuclear deterrence? And Rishi Sunak is trying to follow the Boris Johnson playbook in many ways with his election strategy, which I'm sure we're going to be hearing a lot more about in the coming weeks. He said, the question now is for who do you trust to create a more secure future? He said the moment is now for Britain to choose that future, to build on the progress that we've had, or risk going back to square one. with Keir Starmer. He's been trotting out this line about square one all year. I think I first remember hearing about it in January when the Prime Minister first started talking about square one with Keir Starmer. A lot of people in the country will be thinking square one sounds pretty good right now.
A lot of text coming in saying exactly that.
That it is.
Yeah, exactly that, Natasha. Just touching on Labour briefly, how ready are they for a general election? They were the ones briefing for some time, weren't they, that they thought it would be in the summer, and people thought it was just expectation management and trying to force Sunak to commit to that. It turns out they've been right. Are they ready to go?
I don't think the Conservative Party are ready to go, Ben. Like we were saying earlier, half of seats, the Conservative Party do not have the candidates ready and selected and ready to go. That is going to have to change literally overnight. They are going to have to essentially choose so many candidates in the next couple of days. It's going to be expedited elections all over the place to try and get those people ready. And I think the Prime Minister arguably has caught the party by the back foot a bit. And I think nobody in the party quite imagined that he would go quite so soon. We were expecting it to be October, November, but it's clear that there have been tensions within Number 10 Downing Street, within the top team of Rishi Sunak about when to go. And now we see that those people who are fighting for that summer election have ultimately won out. The Prime Minister has decided that it's not worth waiting for a couple more months to see if the election picture gets any brighter, to see if the economy picks up, and to see if he can finally get those flights off to Rwanda. Now, the fact that the Prime Minister has chosen this date to call the election, we are all going to be wondering why. And I still think tonight we are still no closer. Is there something wrong with the Rwanda plan? Is it being held up in the courts? Is it a sign that we might not be seeing those flights take off? Or is it the fact that the Prime Minister genuinely thinks that the economic picture is as good as it's going to get?